let's get it started. OTAs have kicked off. There's been a lot of interesting things that have gone on, and knock on wood, one of the things that has not happened has been the injury bug. And granted, this is kind of, light workouts, drills. I mean, yeah, they run some plays and things like that, but, this isn't a lot of contact. So, luckily, the Bengals have largely avoided that. And if that changes, do not come yelling at Connor or I for bringing it up. But one thing that's interesting is Andre Smith, the offensive tackle, offensive guard, was missing from OTAs earlier, and Trey Hopkins filled in, and he was the starting guard in drills on the right side there. A lot of people like Trey Hopkins since he joined the Bengals as an undrafted free agent. He flashed well in preseason and things of that nature, but he has not been able to stay healthy. He's been bounced on and off the active roster. Pretty interesting stuff, but it's also a bit concerning given the fact that Smith was brought in as a Band-Aid for Kevin Zeitler leaving, and now that one of their outside gets, quote unquote, outside gets in free agency is not suiting up. Your thoughts on the whole Hopkins-Smith situation, Connor?
I think it's interesting. You look at the Bengals roster, and obviously Smith is supposed to start at right guard. I mean, that's why the Bengals signed him for the contract they signed him for. But I think it's worth mentioning that Trey Hopkins started, or Jim Osarski initially tweeted out that Trey Hopkins was getting, the first team snaps when Andre Smith was out, but that eventually he clarified and said that the people were kind of rotating in and out. To me, I think the biggest indicator of all of this is that TJ Johnson wasn't ahead of Trey Hopkins. I mean, Christian Westerman, you can understand. It's only his second year in the system. Trey Hopkins has been in Cincinnati since 2014. But TJ Johnson's been there since 2013. He started at, I believe, left guard in place of, I'm pretty sure, Clint Bowling. I think it was against the Texans, or maybe it was week 17, maybe it was both. And so you thought, I think the biggest indicator of all of this is the Bengals have three centers on the roster in Russell Bodine, TJ Johnson, and JJ Dielman. But TJ Johnson, at least as a backup guard, is below Trey Hopkins on the depth chart, which is kind of telling to me, because Westerman, who knows, maybe they think I don't know what the Bengals' plan is with him, and I think that him being a supposed like steal in the draft, when really in all reality he's still a 5th round pick, and maybe draft Twitter liked him or whatever, but maybe it makes sense why the Bengals didn't have, or wait till the 5th round to pick him. I don't know. I just think that it's interesting the Bengals have three centers on the roster. They're probably going to carry three centers on the team this year, which is really interesting, especially when you consider, because who's going to I think the guard position is one of the most interesting positions on the roster, because you're probably going to carry three centers. Your offensive linemen are the Bengals going to carry with so many talented players, or at least we believe are talented players on the team. You have receivers, corners, linebackers, safeties. Every position, it seems like, could have more players than usual. And then they carried Jeff Driscoll on the roster all year last year as a backup quarterback. What is going to happen with this team? And so, yeah, I think that the fact that Trey Hopkins was getting first team snaps at right guard could just be it just goes to show how deep this roster really is. And there's critics who are going to say the Bengals' offensive line problems are either going to make or break this team, which who knows, maybe they're right on that. But this is a deep team at almost every position.
The thing that I wonder about, and I want to reiterate all the things that you said, and a lot of validity in what you said there, Connor. This coaching staff, particularly Marvin Lewis and Paul Alexander, really favor the veterans, and it's just interesting to me. They seem to like Christian Westerman. He's taking a backseat to Trey Hopkins, a guy who was an undrafted free agent and has been there a little longer. I mean, is this more again, that annoying preference for a veteran that may or may not have more upside or more skill set than a guy like Westerman or maybe even TJ Johnson. I mean, some of these guys that are sitting on the roster, again, I think a lot of people like Hopkins. They like what they've seen, but he hasn't been healthy and he hasn't been on the active roster regularly. So do you think this is still that veteran preference type of thing, or is it something else?
Who knows? It could be. That's definitely within the realm of possibility, knowing the Bengals. But I think I mean, you kind of. I think the point of Cincinnati fans, at least in my experience, seem to really overvalue a player based on where draft analysts believed he would fall in the draft. You look at Andrew Billings, and really, we know nothing about him. He's a guy who a lot of people thought could go as high as the first round in the draft, but ended up falling to round 4. And sure, draft Twitter loved him. But like, what do we know about him other than the only thing we know about him as an NFL player is that he missed his rookie season due to injury, and now, as good as we thought he was going to be last year, he's probably not even going to he's coming back from injury. So, yet people are excited as Andrew Billings as a potential upgrade over Domata Peko, which whether you believe Peko was a great player or a bad player or whatever, he still had 11 years worth of experience. Was a starter for a very long time, and he had his ups and downs, a lot of downs, but the fact that we as fans just are so quick to rush into the thinking that a guy like Andrew Billings or Christian Westerman, or just because a guy was drafted, because it really, when you think about it, Billings and Westerman weren't even drafted that high. They were kind of they're mid-round picks, and draft Twitter loved them, and they thought that maybe they could be high round picks, but in all reality, I mean, there's a reason why teams pass on it. I don't know why it is. I don't know what teams' reasoning was for picking them where they were picked, but at the end of the day, they're mid-round picks. And at Hopkins, he's a guy who's really stuck around through it all, and so I think it's kind of impressive. I mean, he was on the practice squad for a long time. Like I said, he's been in Cincinnati. This is his 14, 15. So it's his 4th season with the Bengals. And guys like that usually don't stick around. You have, I just saw Orson Charles sign a contract in Kansas City, but he's been bouncing around. Jason DeManch has been bouncing around. Sure, guys sometimes end up back in Cincinnati, but you look at the team and it's hard for guys to hang around on the roster on the fringe for so long. Like guys like Sean Porter eventually fall off. Guys like those types of players, and sure, there's exceptions like with Trey Hopkins, like with P. Dawson, like with some others. But I think I'm rooting for the guy. I'm rooting for everyone, obviously. I mean, it's the Bengals. You hope they win, but I don't know. Personally, I think you look at Trey Hopkins and you see a guy who clearly is working hard, somewhat impressing coaches, and at the end of the day, hopefully deserves a shot at the roster. But at this time of the season, I think it's just so early that it's hard to make these assumptions or implications about trying to read into every single snap as though it's going to have really intense implications. But I think that's just what we tend to do as fans, since there's really nothing else to talk about.
Right. And, there is the overreaction aspect. And, again, these are OTAs. This isn't, mandatory training camp practices, that sort of thing. Andre Smith has the concerning thing for me, Connor, is Andre Smith missing time, just because he's been a guy who has seemingly always missed time because of injury, whether they're big injuries, small injuries, that sort of thing. And this is, yes, the Bengals relied on him heavily as a right tackle. Do you like the pun there? Andre Smith heavily. The
that was mean. Low hanging fruit.
Yeah, I know. I had to grab that opportunity there. But the team has relied on him heavily at right tackle, but they also always had guys waiting in the wings, whether it was, an able tackle or swing guy that they could kick in there to fill in for him. Well, this year he's playing guard, and that is now a huge vacancy now that Zeitler's gone, and seeing him injured is a little bit concerning to me, but it is what it is. And, it's concerning, especially because of the issues on the offensive line. There's the talk of what's good is it's not really so much an injury. There's the talk was that it was bronchitis and he was ill, and that's why he wasn't able to participate in early session OTAs. But it's Andre Smith, and Andre Smith, while he's been a productive player when he's been on the field, unfortunately, he's missed a significant time on the field, which has kind of been a little bit of a MO for the Bengals and their high first-round picks in recent years.